Hello, welcome to another Wayland Library 3D printing tutorial. In this video, I will be going over how to use images to create custom-made coasters or fridge magnets. This works best with kind of symbols and logos. Basically, what we're going to be doing is using a program called Inkscape to convert a basic image into an SVG, which can then be manipulated in Tinkercad to make a, coaster or fridge magnet. With all that said, let's jump right into it. So the first thing we need is Inkscape, which I mentioned earlier. So just open up a browser, go to inkscape.org. Then on the download tab, just click current version. And then over here on the right, click all platforms, and then just pick your operating system, which is most likely Mac or Windows, download and install. And the installer is very straightforward. After you download it, just run it, and you can pretty much hit OK and next on every prompt it gives you, and it'll just go through. Inkscape installed and ready to go. It is now time to start thinking about what images you'd want to convert over. I have some sample pieces printed out here. As you can see, and as I mentioned earlier, like logos and symbols work best for this project. You can see the Gryffindor crest is probably the most complex, and it came out okay, but the simpler ones I think came out much better. And as you search the web for some of your favorite things or images that maybe just look cool, let me save you some time and headache and say that complex drawings and straight up pictures absolutely will not work. Believe me, I've tried. They look hideous. Stick to symbols and logos and keep it simple. Feel free to pause the video at this moment or come back to it later. I am now going to assume that you have an image file or two, and we can now open up Inkscape. When you open up for the first time, you should come up to a pop-up window like this. You can just click on New Document, and it will bring you to a screen that looks like this. All right, let's open up an image. We can go over to File, Open. And as you can see, for me, I kind of defaulted to where I have all my images saved, but this will be different for you depending on where you save them. Odds are they're either in downloads or pictures. I believe Mac also has a kind of pictures folder where they would go, but unfortunately I can't replicate that. But at any rate, just locate where you save the pictures, select the one you want to import. I'm going to do the simplest one I have here, which is the kind of symbol from the Alien movies. Just click it, open. These are all fine, just click OK. And it probably comes in like this, super zoomed in and kind of hard to take in, but what you can actually do is hold down Control on your keyboard and use the mouse wheel to just zoom out a bit. You can get a better view of the whole thing. And what we're going to do next is basically trace the outline, and doing that will allow us to then export what we have as an SVG, which can be imported into Tinkercad. So first thing we want to do is just select the image you've imported into Inkscape. It will highlight like that. Go up to Path, and third option down is Trace Bitmap. Just click that. There are multiple things you can do here, multiple ways you can get to that SVG cutout. But the one surefire way I've found that just works 99% of the time is to go to the Multiple Scans tab, and you can leave it on brightness steps. If your image is in color, you probably want to set this to color, but simple black and white, this is fine. Just do remove background, stack, hit apply, and then we can drag this out. At this point, we can delete our original image. We can always bring it back later by just undoing it, but for now, let's select the original, delete it, and basically what we do now is double click this. The kind of highlight box will go away, and we can now actually drag out a cutout, which will serve as our SVG, and we can just continuously click, delete, click, delete, click, delete. What's left over, don't need it. Make one big selection box just to make sure there's nothing left hanging around. And then File, Save As, and then we can set it to, we'll make sure you set it to plain SVG, and then obviously name it if you want, and then just click Save. And just to show you, I followed those exact same steps on all of the images I showed earlier. You might remember the image of the 4 images, and then they're kind of 3D printed final forms. These are all of the SVGs I essentially used. As you can see, they're pretty much all in black and white except for one. That's totally fine as long as you get just 2 colors. And while exporting, just keep in mind that anything that is white is essentially going to be empty space, and black or another color is going to come in as solid. And if you've saved an SVG or 2 at this point, you can close Inkscape. It'll ask you this even though you saved it as an SVG. Just hit close without saving. Just close all of these. And we can jump right into Tinkercad. And these are the 4 coasters I showed earlier in the video. Obviously these are, they're STL forms, as well as one other design over here that I didn't show. As you can see, there are a couple different kind of design approaches on display here, which I will now go over. Just get these out of the way. First things first, let's import the SVG we just made. I did the kind of symbol of the Alien movies, so I'll import that. And depending on what image you started with, the dimensions might be highlighted red and you get a message saying the image is too big. But you can just highlight these, and if you just punch in a number, Tinkercad will automatically scale the other side. And it doesn't really matter at all what number you push in because resizing them in Tinkercad will be super simple. As you can see, importing, sometimes it takes a while. There we go. And it imported pretty big. Odds are yours did too, but just highlight one of these white corners, hold down the Shift key, and then left click on it, scale it down a bunch. Something a little more manageable. Make it a little bit taller. All right. From here, the design is a little open-ended. I'm going to try to make a coaster or, maybe a magnet. You'd glue the magnet on the back of it. So I'm going to use cylinders, but you could just as easily use any shape that is flat or can be flipped flat. So, the box or rectangle, roof or triangle, heart, all those will work fine, but I'm going for coaster, so I'm going to use a cylinder. I'm going to drag this out, and I've found good dimensions that work for this. I mean, it work just as well if you want to make a magnet, is to just go for something between 80 and 90 millimeters. So I'll make this one 85. And you can set kind of the top to bottom height to either 4 or 5 millimeters. Dismiss the ruler. And as you can see, I actually wound up resizing the SVG almost exactly, but you can tweak it a little bit more here. Let's lift this up a little bit so we can resize it a little easier. As you can see, that's poking out just a little bit. So we'll resize it just a tad, reposition it. All right, I think that's a good size. Maybe we'll lift it up just a little bit. Okay. And from here, I like to think that there are essentially kind of three best approaches. We can kind of carve out a rim on the coaster and kind of have this alien symbol solidly sitting in it, shown here. You can see it's sitting in the middle. Everything is nice and flush. Or you can dip the solid object a little bit below the rim to kind of make, like a small barrier around the coaster, as I did here. Or you can just set this to whole, make some adjustments, and basically just kind of punch it in the middle, like I did with the Spider-Man and Gryffindor logo. If you've watched my other Tinkercad videos, you probably have already a good idea of how to do each of those three designs, but I'll go over them anyway. So we can push this off to the side for now. And what we're essentially going to do now is select our kind of cylinder or box or whatever shape you're working with. Duplicate it. We'll drag off one of these to the side. And we basically just want to, subtract the dimensions just a little bit from the original, something in the ballpark of 2 to 5 millimeters. So our original is 85. I'm going to bring up the ruler by hitting R on my keyboard. Symbol for it is also up here. And I'll subtract 3, so I'll make these dimensions 82. And then we can dismiss the ruler. And then we just need to move the slightly smaller object up 1 or 2 millimeters. Easiest way to do that is to hold down, on Windows, hold down the Control key. On Mac, I believe it's the Command key. With that held down, just tap the up arrow on your keyboard once or twice. You can change this to whole as well. And then on an empty space on the work plane, over here, up here, just hold down left click to make a selection box. Highlight both those objects, and up over here where my cursor is the align tool. We can click that, and we want to center align on kind of the X and Y axes. So we can ignore these 3 dots over here, just these two middle ones. Click them. They should gray out. This will be center aligned. And then all we have to do is up here next to the light bulb group, just click that. It will carve out a little chamber for our object and give the coaster or magnet a nice looking rim. And then all that's left to decide is if we want our kind of imported SVG symbol or logo to kind of be flush with the top or kind of sunk in a little bit. So if we want everything to be flush and even along the top, it's as simple as just going, all right, that's 4 millimeters tall. We'll select this, bring up the ruler. The top to down height is what we'd want to change. You can see it's got the kind of up and down arrow. We'll just change the 7 to 4, hit enter, dismiss the ruler. And you could try and align these if you wanted, but you know, we're probably working with a pretty uneven shape, or at least I am here, so I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it in there. Use the arrow keys to arrange it. And then all you need to do is selection box, group, and you're done. If you want the symbol to sink a bit, just ungroup that. It's really as simple as just, you know, you can leave it just like this, but obviously you would want to change the height. So, you know, you probably want this to go from 4 to 3.5 or 3. Split the difference and say 3.25. And then just dismiss, group again. And as you can see, it's sunk down a little bit. We've got a little kind of barrier going around our symbol. And for the last approach, which is, you know, kind of just setting it to whole and carving out the symbol in the middle, I'll just go ahead and undo these steps I did. Get back to the basic coaster. Delete that. It doesn't really matter what height this is. And just go ahead and set the kind of imported symbol to whole. And again, we can kind of just eyeball it. And all we need to do is push it up as deep as we want to make it. So we set our kind of base object at 4 millimeters. Right now these are even. So if you want your carved in symbol to kind of be as deep as it can be, just, you know, select it when you have it positioned how you want. Hold down Control or Command, tap the up arrow once, and then group it. I'm gonna kind of push it up a little bit. So, and obviously this is 4 millimeters tall. Every kind of tap on the up arrow key you can think of as 1 millimeter. So you don't want to put it up 4 millimeters because then it won't carve anything in at all. So I'll punch it up 2 and group. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And if you want to get really specific in how that works, I'll go ahead and ungroup that and bring it back to the base level. This thing down here called the snap grid actually determines kind of the distance in which the objects move up or down. So if you really want this to be punched in as much as could be, you probably don't want to do 0.1 millimeters. That's probably way too deep. The bottom is going to be paper thin. But we'll set it to 0.25 Just give it one tick on the up arrow. And as you can see, that is significantly deeper. Or you could make it as shallow as can be by going to, bringing it up to 3 ticks and then changing this to half a millimeter and essentially going 3.5 millimeters up. All about how you want it to look. You're also not limited to, just working with the imported object and what your base object is. Now here on the Red Sox symbol I did, let me just ungroup this. I liked how it was sitting in the middle, but I didn't like, and I like the rim, but I didn't like these empty spaces to the sides. And as you can see, these are just, resized. I believe it's the roof object, round roof object. Yeah, I just brought one of these over and flipped it around and resized it and just mashed them together and grouped it. You also might wind up with some weird kind of artifacts when you import or group your SVG. Let me just bring up an example here. So this is kind of one of the Spider-Man logos I did. As you can see, I wanted to, carve it into the middle. But I got these weird kind of things in the middle that aren't going to be too 3D printer friendly and just kind of make the whole thing look weird. I don't like it, and odds are you don't either, so how do we get rid of them? Well, in this instance, I'm going to hit W on my keyboard. I want to bring the work plane on the surface that the kind of weird artifacts are on. And you won't need to do this if you import it and notice it right away, you can just start working with the base work plane. But I noticed these when I grouped them, so I'm going to bring over the work plane, set it to there. And then we can just kind of drag out a whole box and just kind of follow the outline until it is going to eat away at what you want to get rid of. And I could probably resize this a little bit better or use more objects to avoid, cutting out the tops of those pieces. But I'm going to decide it's not really a big deal. So I'm going to position that and group it. And it might take a little while depending on how many objects you're working with, how many SVGs you imported. But there we go, artifacts removed. And don't worry about any kind of those outlines if you see them. If you did the work plane correct and your whole object was flush, this is just something weird Tinkercad does. When you actually 3D print it, it won't show up. And like I said, I'm pretty much designing coasters here, but this entire method works just as well if you want to make your own fridge magnets. You could just 3D print this, glue a magnet on the back, and you've got a fridge magnet. I will say that you still probably want to attach it to some kind of base. Let me just ungroup this for a second here. Just because you might think this looks cool and I'm just going to 3D print this and, put a magnet on the back and it'll look great, but it won't, because if we zoom in here, this is going to 3D print as just a bunch of disconnected pieces. So you'll just wind up with a bunch of loose pieces that you can't really assemble anything with, much less attach a magnet to. So just attach a base to it so everything sticks together, print it, glue the magnet, and that's pretty much it for importing as SVGs and turning them into your own coasters and magnets. One final thing to mention is that you can paint 3D printed objects. A couple of examples here. As you can see, still very much works in progress. You know, they need a couple more coats of paint. Spider-Man's eyes need to be white. But yeah, these are great things to kind of start with if you're new to painting, especially to painting 3D printed things. All you need is to give them a coat or two of acrylic primer, then grab some acrylic paints, and yeah, then just start having fun. That's pretty much the end of this video. Feel free to leave comments or questions in the comments section, and thanks for watching.